Okay, we're good. I will open Wednesday, July 14th, City Council special meeting. I need to approve the agenda.
Second.
Seconded. All in favor?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we'll jump right into our public comment phase. And I believe there's some folks that signed up. So who would like to start?
And I'll speak at once.
Ready?
I'm starting, I'm not like at the top of the list, but Mary Beth Cowell and PO Box 492 Cannon Beach. I'm here to encourage the process of getting this measure onto the ballot for the prepared food tax. Because as I look at it, I've been reading the documents on the website, city website. It looks like there are 3 avenues that could be gone down. The food and beverage tax, well, that's another thing we need to talk about. Property tax or increasing the TLT. The other two, the TLT is already right around 10%, and it would have to go up to almost, well, it would have to go up to 18% to garner the same income as this 5% food tax. And property tax, in order to garner the same amount, would have to be $154 per 100,000, split between the two entities, the city and the fire department. Again, that seems like a pretty heavy burden, because the residents would be paying to provide the services, the safety services that visitors need. The TLT only would tax those people who are staying overnight. It would not tax the people who are only here for a day trip. The food tax seems to be the best way to have visitors who are here pitch in towards that pot of money that is needed, that funding source that is needed to cover the services that they require while they're here. The fire department does a wonderful job at fielding the calls that they get, but they're getting more and more calls, and many of those are day trippers. They're not staying at the hotels. It seems unreasonable too for the hotels to have an 18% TLT. That's getting into the realm of what the heck. A 5% tax on food and beverage that's prepared seems to be the most logical way to create this funding source for the city and the fire department. And we can all buy into that. I mean, we all go out and eat. We all have the need to eat. That the beverages were taken out seems a little odd because it does leave money on the table. Cindy from Ecola Seafood at the Wednesday morning meeting this morning said that their total activity beverage is about 10% of what they take in. And so that leaves a significant amount on the table. And she also made the comment that it will be more difficult to program and train if there's this yes and no thing going on. So she felt that it would be easier, and I wish she was here to speak, but to have it just be food and beverage prepared, there it is, all in one block. The reason why this money is needed is to cover safety services. And I don't think there's a person here or in Cannon Beach that would say that we don't need safety services in our town. It would be really nice to have an ambulance stationed here. Taking 18 to 25 minutes to respond to a medical call is the difference between life and death. And I'm not pulling any punches there. When you have a medical emergency, every second counts. So putting an ambulance here in town with paramedics would be huge. That would really be a benefit to everyone that is in this community. And that is pretty much where I'm coming from. And I just wanted to come here and make sure that everyone here is on the same page. So I hope that we will see this on the ballot, that we can do this in November and get this rolling so that we have the services we need to keep safe. Thank you.
Who's next?
Les Sinclair, PO Box 1394 here in Cannon Beach. I don't have a whole lot to say. I think Mary Beth did a great job of making most of my points for me. We critically need the services and the systems, the buildings, the things that this money is intended to provide. I don't think there's anybody, as far as I know, that disagrees that the need is real. I just wanted to come before you and tell you that I appreciate that it's been a really long process, and I appreciate the fact that you'll have stuck with it and worked it sincerely. I just wanted to let you know that I personally am right there with you. This is an important thing for the community to decide. Please do everything in your power to make sure that this gets on the ballot. To let it slide and miss that deadline would be somewhere between terrible and catastrophic. It's terribly important that we get this moved through. Anyway, thank you very much.
I'm Ken Potter, 131 Ross Lane. And it just occurs to me that we're dividing all our visitors into two groups. The people that are staying at the hotels, people are just coming for the day from Portland or Vancouver or someplace within reach. But by far the greatest number of people that I talk to are actually traveling through. So they're not out here for the day, they're on their way down the coast, or they're just traveled up the coast and they're headed into Washington. And those folks, by and large, are stopping for a meal. And I think that we need to really consider that aspect. And that's a great deal of our traffic, a great deal of our parking, and a great deal of the services that are needed, that people that are passing through. Keep that third group in mind. Thank you.
Thanks, Ken. Next.
Good evening, Phil Vincent, 191 Madison Street. Just came to observe tonight, but completely support the points that were made. Wanted to add, it occurred to me while it was speaking, was the expectation, I think, of visitors that are utilizing the recreation of Cannon Beach, the beaches, the restaurants, the hotels. There probably is an expectation that the safety services are there as they've traveled around the country or other parts of the state. So I think the transparency of having the tax on the receipts, I saw that in the write-up that it didn't have to be, it could be included in the price of the meal. But I thought, everywhere I travel, lived in Michigan, lived in, Seattle, you most always have a line, detailed for what the tax is. And I think that's valuable. And then to not have an ambulance for someone who's had a medical emergency, whether it's a tragedy on a beach or in their home, I think they would just expect to have certain services. So I totally think it's a very, very positive thing to do. And I totally agree. We need to have it on the ballot. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Okay. I'm Judy McLaughlin, and at PO Box 623, Canton Beach. And I think I'm going to read this properly too, so it'll be a little shorter. And I wore this shirt just so you know I have worked at a restaurant for 20 years, but I don't think I'll put this on. I brought this just to a little tiny visual. You can see the teacher in me, I guess. It's pretty old, from 1975, but it kind of reflects Cannon Beach, Pacific Ocean, where for the greater good. I'm not speaking for Moe's restaurant, although there are some who definitely agree with me. But anyway, the whales, and the other day I happened to see Lisa Hobbecker, and she does such a fantastic job working in the city hall for our puffins, and talk about for the greater good, the fireworks that we don't have because of these wonderful birds. And it helps a lot of people, tourists and our guests, like the fact that it's quiet and so forth on July 4th. So anyway, I'll read now. For the common good is a cry to mean that more than taking care of just ourselves, we need to look out for the whole community. We are all in this together, whether we are locals who are young, working adults, or retired seniors. Many of us so-called retired seniors who own a house also volunteer, mow our lawns, and do a lot of our own maintenance. I'm healthy and mobile right now, but after much introspection, though I've worked for a restaurant for 20 years, I am for the greater good. I do believe that starting in July of 2022, the food or if you decide food and beverage, both, proposal of 5%, I think is an answer, a stable answer to helping our fire department with its crucial needs, such as a local ambulance, our own paramedic, which we do not have yet, up to this point, and some surfer rescue local trained personnel, so that, people can be helped within a realistic time for life-saving, like Mary Beth was talking about. A real bonus for us locals is that it is the day trippers, our guests, people who are passing through to other places, and people who stay in hotels and dine out will pay for this tax and not the residents. At almost 81 years old, I've already told you I work in both. Anyway, just on Mondays, only 2 hours now, but both is like a family, and they even give a meal after a shift, they get a discount. And a lot of restaurants do that. They're kind of like a little family, really. Every restaurant, pizza place, espresso, ice cream, and candy shops all have their own special benefits for their employees. Let's see. As of 4 years ago, we permanent and second homeowners still are continuing to pay a 20% increase in taxes, property taxes, from a bond was levied, at that time, 4 years ago. Renters also felt an increase in their rent, many renters did, when this increase in property tax happened, So anyway, many local residents who are on a set pension and maybe even some families might have to move if there's another big increase in property taxes. And it's nice to have families. We've got a school here too, for them. So the fire department, we have 2 more paragraphs. The fire department clean quality water. I think there's some project called resilience. Something about the
Water supply resiliency.
Oh, that's good. Oh, thank you. Anyway, that sounds really important, for our health. And eventually a solution for a new city hall must be addressed sooner, not later. I went to the city hall yesterday and just happened to see some of the areas, that need. Oh, wait. If a tsunami or earthquake were to happen here, just imagine losing our ability to call the police and the many city departments on which we depend. This past weekend, this is the last paragraph, I gave directions to a really sweet couple who was passing through, actually. They wanted to know where the closest public bathroom is. And then I happened to tell them that, well, can you believe it's $80,000 for 2 public bathrooms for the toilet paper and all? And anyway, then they commented that they really liked Hannah Beach. They had been here once before. I told them that we are trying to figure out how to pay for some needed city services, like our fire department and our city hall, and that we appreciate their kindness to come here and help us get back on our feet economically, since our restaurants and all were closed down for about 3 months ago. They asked me how many locals there are. When I told them there were no more than 1,400, I may be a little wrong. Somebody told me it might be 1,700, but
17.
is it 17? Okay, thank you. They just said, just charge us for parking and do what else you need to do. We will still come here no matter what you decide. I told them that our city council and the community are considering a food and beverage tax or food tax, anyway, of 5%. They said, besides charging for parking, do that too. And they were just lovely. And they said, well, we might write a letter to the editor from a guest, from 2 guests. And that's all. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Post office box 973 Cannon Beach. I agree with everybody else, but you've heard that several times. And tonight's meeting is on the resolution, and I was wondering, is it appropriate to make comments on the proposed resolution?
Sure.
I mean, I know, it's your decision and stuff, but I just wondered if it's okay, I don't want to overstep. Okay, so when I was looking at this, my feeling is we should all do what we possibly can to get this to pass. So we want to make it as easy for people to digest. And we know that everyone is on board for the fire department. Everybody supports the fire department. All the restaurants we're talking, everybody supports the fire department. And if I'm correct, when this all started, talking this last couple of years, was about the fire department and then maybe City Hall and the police department, which is, obviously needed. So, as I look at this, more things have gotten added but I know you've got to cover your bases legally so that you can, use the money for other things when we get these projects taken care of. But I wonder if we present it, the suggested changing of the wording for section 4, paragraph 3. You do have the fire district listed as first, and that's good because people will see that and they're on board with that. Then you've got city operations. Then you've got city hall and police department. Oh, no, excuse me, city operations, infrastructure, and then city hall and police department are last. And just for the general public out there reading it, it looks like that might be how the money's going to be spent. And I'm just wondering if it would be better to do the fire department first, city hall and the police department, infrastructure, and then city operations. Because to me, city operations, that's put in there so that you can legally use the money for whatever. And you're not, I mean, you are not restricting yourself to just these things. But it's also what people are against. They don't like the, that part. They're on board and they can get on board with the police department. They want the safety stuff. So that would just be a suggestion, is to just change the order of importance, the priority, kind of prioritize those in that particular part. And then, which kind of goes to also in section 4, the caption that would be on the ballot. It says tax on prepared food to fund city and fire. I think if we put fire and city first, it might be more pleasing to somebody, when they go and because this is why the tax is going to the vote, is it started out as the fire. And it's just kind of a psychological thing in my mind. Okay. Oh, and in that new wording, I don't know if Mark, if you caught it but the Cannon Beach Rural Fire Protection. Cannon Beach Rural Fire Protection District. Protection is part of their legal name. And I don't know, I would assume you want the.
I didn't see it, so now I'm looking.
Okay, it's
In the first whereas.
on the first page where it
Yeah.
says, that you want to modify the, so it would be the wording in the summary that you're talking about.
Hmm.
So it just, okay, and, okay. Again, with the operations word, it seems to me that should be, like when you're listing things, that should kind of be the last, so that it doesn't look like, like that's really what you want the taxes for, when we already have the TLT. I mean, our budget's pretty good. We don't really need it for operations, but we will use it when it's used, after it's used for the other. And again, it's psychological stuff, I think, that and again, it's just in my opinion, we should focus on when needing the tax for safety reasons. And, it's well documented, the fire district needs it. And we know City Hall and the police department needs it very bad. I assume that you'll put the command center stuff in the police department when it's done, who knows, but so that's, you know, that's very important. And also, another thing that I think is a psychological thing is I think that if there was the intergovernmental agreement done between the district and the city before November, that people could see how the district, the fire district and the city are going to work together. If people can see that and they see how the money's going to be split and how, you know, how that's going to work, that part is already taken care of, that will give them confidence that this is, you know, they can see really why this is really needed, and that, you know, it's going to happen the way we've all presented it to happen. Just a suggestion, again. Like I said, I asked permission to talk about this. So, I think that's kind of. So then I just hope that you'll all just see the real need for this to be on the November ballot and make sure that it happens, and you know, if we all work in a positive way, I think that it's going to do more good than we even know. So, thank you.
Sharon?
Babatia, 1420, PO Box 1426, Cambridge. The last council meeting, the decision was made to refer this to a vote of the people. I don't agree with that decision, but it was a majority decision, so I respect that. I think we're in a very deep and serious financial hole in the city. It's impacting emergency services and infrastructure and the collective safety of everyone in this town. We need to start digging out of that hole. And the only viable way I see to do that is with this tax. I don't see any other viable alternative. If it's not too late, I'd like to see a food and beverage tax. And I'd like to see it on the November ballot, no later than November. The can has been kicked down the road long enough. That's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Executive Chef Jeff Shutt, PO Box 1488 Palm Beach, also from Scottsdale. Pleasure to see you guys tonight. I'm here on behalf of the restaurant industry. Myself, I've been in it for 43 years across the United States, so I've seen it from a national level, extremely deep. Everywhere from Vegas to Scottsdale, where I have restaurants as well. I do high-end steakhouses, and I'm bringing one right here next door to the Pelican at 1355 South Hemlock. Little units there. It's kind of fun. Working with David Vanetta, a local architect who bought the property. You see us tearing the place all apart right now. A lot of mud flying around over there. But the benefit of making the place look great. I'm here to actually support the tax as a restaurateur. I pay 8.6% in Arizona right now. I am also an old police officer from the 80s near Detroit, Michigan, so I understand what they go through. I've let my hair grow since then. That being said, I visited your police lieutenant here. I met with Mark at his office and understanding the items that you need. I sense what restaurants are most disappointed about, that our contestant issue is, where does this tax take us next? I came here, I signed my lease with David a few months back, and this wasn't even on the notes. I came here because I thought it was a favorable tax scenario, which, hey, why not? It sounds great. I visited here in 1995. I've been back poking around, finding that right time. And I feel right now it's fantastic. You guys are doing an outstanding job running the city. I like what I see, and I'm excited to be part of it. I am again in favor, as I mentioned with Mark and Chris and everybody else here, the Chamber of Commerce. What I am hearing tonight, though, is a couple of things that I thought maybe I clarified. Folks are asking about the taxes on the alcohol and beverage things. That's generally run through the OLCC. They reserve the right to tax that solely. So I don't see that can actually be put on in November. I think that's an actual right of the liquor department. Believe me, you guys just granted my liquor license. I thank you very much for that. So got to smooth forward here, guys. But at any rate, that, just to clarify that, because I've heard some of that discussion as well. When I do my taxes on my point of sale systems, it does line item them. So I think that's only fair to your guests that are coming through town. I think that should possibly be a requirement when you design this bill of how you're putting it through to the restaurants. But again, I'm really just here to say yes to the tax. I'd like to see it come in a little bit lower on the start. I think what restaurateurs worry about, as I started to say at the beginning, is what does this lead us to next? Is there another tax following? Is there another one? I'm in a relationship back in Scottsdale with the vice mayor of my town, North Scottsdale. So I see these things on a local level and a political level as well. So I understand what happens next and what the segue is. We've seen county things increase. We've seen this be implied, et cetera, et cetera. And, after last year with COVID and the shutdowns, I mean, a lot of us lost substantial money. So this is a hard bite for restaurants. So if you're getting rebuttal, understand that, I would think. I lost well over $500,000 personally. It was a big hit, and it's not fun. You're looking at recovery, which is brutal right now. We can't find staff anywhere. It's not only a case of being lazy or that $300 little thing that they get every week. It's people are changing their lives right now. They're looking, it's retrospect. What am I going to do? Maybe I shouldn't be in this industry anymore. People are treating service staff, restaurateurs, owners, servers, everybody kind of brutally. They're kind of being rude. And I'm seeing that nationwide. I was just in Las Vegas 2 weeks ago with some buddies of mine, and they're in the business, and we're all talking the same language. It's very, very hard right now. But at the end of the day, Mark needs 2 fire trucks. He's got 25-year-old trucks there that sound like they need service and they're dated and such. But even worse is your police department is really, in rough shape. And again, that ex-cop comes out of me and I say, you got to help these guys. I think part of what also is being disputed by some of the restaurateurs is the language, as last speaker mentioned, how you're noting it in here. When I see something, these are the, I apologize, it's not your meeting notes today. When you're generating 50% by the PFT and provide 50% to the Cannon Beach Fire Department, keeping 5%, it's language, ultimately. What I think as, again, restaurateurs, if we're going to pay this tax, we want to know where that money is directly going. And should it be designed strictly for the fire department and the police department? Or is Cannon Beach doing it a 5% administrative fee? I'm kind of losing a little bit here. So I'd like to know more decisively, especially now that I'm invested, I got a bunch of money going on in here, and I want to really know where my dollars are going to affect you. Being that I am a high-end steakhouse, I'll probably be paying the highest taxes here for food besides Pelican. Those guys rock it out over there. But again, I think it's language. I think that people are very concerned about that. Maybe it should be noted a little bit better. But other than that, I appreciate you taking time to listen to me tonight. And thank you for letting me in your community.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for confirming a rumor. I had heard. Anybody else in the house? Rusty, do we have anybody? I had three names. Jeannie's here, so Aaron Matusik.
Yep, Aaron's here. Let me see if I can. Several hands up.
Yeah, I see that. Aaron,
Is the floor mine?
it is.
All right, well, thank you, Mayor and Council, for having me tonight. My name is Aaron Matusik, and I'm a real estate lawyer that moved to Cannon Beach as a full-time resident about 18 months ago. I want to start by saying I fully support restaurants in Cannon Beach and frequent them often. I also fully support the food tax and believe it should be a food and beverage tax. I attended the last council meeting and couldn't help but hear commenter after commenter say, I fully support police and fire, but I don't support the food and beverage tax. Now, Chef Jeff, I really appreciate your testimony a minute ago. I think that is brilliant, progressive, well thought out, and it is welcomed in this town. So I can't wait to try your steakhouse. How does someone fully support something if they fail to provide adequate funding? The answer is it's impossible. The opponents, including members of this council and the mayor, have been given plenty of time to come up with alternatives, but have offered nothing substantive that I'm aware of. Cannon Beach is no longer a village. It has real growth issues and desperately needs this leadership to step up and adapt to the challenges that come with growth. Last week, I didn't hear anything, or a couple weeks ago at the last council meeting, I didn't hear anything about the state of Oregon's corporate activity tax. Some restaurants in town are passing this cat tax along to its patrons as a line item on their bill. They don't have to, they could absorb it, but instead they pass it through. Has it hurt their business? I see lines out of the door of at least one of these restaurants that passes the cat tax on to its patrons. So my educated guess is that the cat tax has not affected their bottom line. I also didn't hear anything last week about the young girl that lost her life in June in front of an unstaffed lifeguard station in surf conditions that couldn't have been much flatter for the Pacific Ocean. The harsh reality is that she'd likely be alive if this city was managed appropriately and funded adequately. If we had adequate funding, there could be multiple lifeguard stations around town that would be able to handle water-related incidents before they turn into police and fire-related emergency incidents. Clearly, our lives are not adequately protected. Clearly, our homes and commercial businesses are not adequately protected. Please do your job and allow this to appear on the November ballot without further delay. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Do we have Lisa Kerr on?
Yes.
Okay. Lisa Kerr, Post Office Box 94, Cannon Beach, Oregon. I'm unmuted, right?
Hi, Lisa.
Hear you.
To me, the issue is very simple. Either folks put the safety and welfare of the citizens of Cannon Beach first, or they prioritize the inconvenience that a food and beverage tax may impose on the restaurant business. This kind of tax has worked fine in Ashland and in Yachats. It hasn't hurt the restaurant businesses at all. And so many of our visitors are from Washington and California, states with much larger taxes on sales. When they come to Cannon Beach, a 5% tax such as this is really a bargain, when relatively speaking. A regular sales tax on goods and services is regressive because it impacts low-income people disproportionately. But this is a tax on eating and drinking in a restaurant, not on the necessities of life. Eating out is a luxury and something on which you spend discretionary income. It's not a necessity. This is a unique setting with visitors from all over the United States and the world. It is a privilege to have for a restaurant to be here. Lines to get into restaurants are out the door. I do not understand the attitude of certain restaurants seem to feel they are doing Cannon Beach a favor by being here. I think the opposite is true. I think it's a privilege to have a restaurant here. And moreover, the city has really bent over backwards to help the restaurants during the COVID pandemic. I think a little gratitude in return would be nice. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. Let's go to Bob Wayne. Hey, Bob, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I don't have much to say. The previous two speakers hit all my bullets. Bob Wayne, Box 520, Cannon Beach, Oregon. Many of you know me as a retired surgeon, and so I really like the idea of having an ambulance in town. That would be a dream, you know. But the two bullets I just want to mention are that you really should add the beverage tax as well. It doesn't have to be on liquor, I don't think, but it would make it simpler for the restaurants to be able to not have to break out the beverages that they serve, the drinks and so forth. So I think it would be in their favor to have both. It would raise a little more revenue. And the only other thing I want to say is that we really need to vote on this in November and not kick the can down the road again. Thank you very much for all that you do as a council. Really appreciate it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you. Cindy?
Hello.
Hello, Cindy. Thank you.
So sorry, I was trying to figure out how to unmute. So, thank you very much for taking the time to hear me. I just also wanted to talk a little more specifically about a couple of items that are, actually in the paperwork. I do agree that I think that beverages should be included, because the more things that get broken out make it that much more complicated for us to implement the system. And I also don't understand why we would want to leave that money on the table without, if we're going to go through the motions to put the tax in place, it will make a big difference in the amount of money that's collected and not a big difference. In fact, it probably is harder for us without having the beverages on there. I agree the alcohol is an issue and probably should not be on there, but when you start talking about coffee and fountain drinks, I would think that would be a significant amount of money that would come in for this tax. The other question that I have is, and it kind of has to do with the same concept of kind of trying to divide things out. In the section 3.30.020, it talks about the bakery products. Not being in the bakery business, I don't know how that affects them, but to me, it seems more confusing. For example, we sell round loaves of, we call them sourdough cannonballs. I will occasionally have somebody come in and buy 12 cannonballs. They're taking them home and they're going to make bread bowls and put their clam chowder in for their huge group that they're going to do a luncheon for. So in my case, that would be impossible for me to say one is taxed and 6 or more are not. we go over, and so what is the difference between, say, that situation? And let's say we go over to Mariner Market and out of their deli, we buy some chicken legs. And then those chicken legs are really to take home to eat. I mean, it's like, I don't get how we kind of do that separation. And I don't even understand how in the world you could separate out an individual item like that. And then lastly, one of my concerns in the paperwork is in the same section, it talks about, and I'm not sure I totally have this right because it does get kind of confusing to me, but it talks about like with the schools and having independent food contractors. And am I correct in it saying that independent food contractors in the school would be taxed? Is that what it's saying, that, or are they excluded from being taxed? And if it's saying that they would be taxed, I think that section should be looked at, because most schools that I'm aware of, like the Seaside School District, the Astoria School District, all now use independent contractors to service their food service. And that is one section that I do think should be excluded from the tax, because the problem is that the amount of children that are on, you know, free lunch or reduced lunches is pretty significant in our county. And I think that the burden on, for example, our charter school, if they ever grew to the point that they were able to use a food service, or say, for example, if we ever did get an elementary school, which I'm sure we won't because of the huge school, the beautiful new school we have. But I just think that that's, if I'm reading that right, and if they would be taxed, I think that would be looked at. And that is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. We'll try and answer some questions when we get into our discussion. So we had one more, Kathy. Hi, Kathy.
Hello, I am speaking as a Cannon Beach landlord, and I just really want to encourage you to get this on the coming ballot. Also, if there was a way to include the beverages in there, I think that that is, as previous people have said, leaving money on the table. And I feel like this is a really important revenue source for the city, because I feel that it is incongruous to speak about affordable housing at the same time as have no other means of funding than property taxes. By relying on the property taxes to pay for the city functions and infrastructure, you're creating an unsolvable problem as far as affordable housing, because the landlords have to pay their property taxes and rents go up accordingly. And so this is a brilliant way to tax the users in the area and not put all of the burden on the property owners. Taking the beverages off seems like it complicates a situation more than it needs to be. And like the previous speakers were saying, simpler is better. And when we're talking about burden on the restaurants with this pass-through tax, it's not taxing the restaurants until you make it complicated. And so when you complicate the issues, then you're creating a heavier burden on them. And I certainly hope that we can get a simplified ballot measure put in front of the voters, since that's the direction the council has decided to go. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that was everybody. Oh, somebody just snuck in. Crystal?
Can you hear me?
Hi, Crystal. Yes.
Hi, Sam. I just wanted to mention that I really did, I misspoke at the last meeting about the building. I do see now that there are some problems with City Hall. And I just wanted to add a couple things that about everybody saying that it's a pass-through tax. Well, locals eat here too. So it's not just a pass-through tax. It will affect the locals. And also, the gentleman that spoke about taxing all the businesses and that it would really affect the lower income people. Well, we have boutiques, we have gift shops, we have art galleries that is not a necessity. And that would be great to include those businesses. And to bring up the parking situation again, add that into it. And that's all I had to say. Thank you very much. I really appreciate all of you and keep our fingers crossed. Let's go to this vote in November. Thank you.
Thanks, Crystal. Okay, that was all the hands and last call in the audience. Jeff, you want to come back?
Real quick, thank you so much. Phil Vincent, box 1190. Prior career worked in point of sale for 10 years. The reason of bringing it up is there's a lot of discussion about the complexity from the earliest days and simplest machines to the most complex, bar institute equipment. It's a programming, very simple to do, whether it's simple and a few keys. It's not hard to split out. And the operators know, or they have someone who does it for them. They program menus, items all the time. So by adding it, whether it's a tax table or a flat rate, those things are really, I want to emphasize it's not a burden to incorporate a tax, add another tax line. So just wanted to add that because I don't see it as a burden there, especially giving the restaurants and such the 5%, administrative part of the tax back. Seems quite a gift, actually. So other states, I don't believe there's any give back to implement a tax of any kind. They just, they pass it through and they pay their taxes and that's it. They don't. So it's like the bottle deposits here for, our grocery stores. They don't get anything for maintaining that. So it just want to let you know that that's not a burden. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our public comment phase. Oh, Sharon.
I'll just sit from here. Cindy reminded me of something I have too on the when she was talking about that one paragraph of what is and what isn't, and it says that intended for off-premises consumption. So if you have a takeout order, that's not going to be taxed because it's going to be off premises.
We'll get to that in our.
I mean, that's just a question
That's a question we'll bring up.
Yeah.
Okay, now last call. Thank you. Okay, so let's jump right into our discussion. Bruce or Ashley, who wants to start?
I think Ashley should.
What do you think, Aaron?
Sounds good. So
I think when she starts, I won't have to do anything the rest of the night.
So Ashley Driscoll, City Attorney's Office. So I think I am going to start my comments off tonight with the council's permission addressing the beverage issue. Okay. So as the council knows, I typically do not discuss legal risks that the city has in an open city council meeting. It is not a best practice in what I do in municipal law. I have those conversations with the city council members in a non-public forum subject to attorney-client privilege. So in this case, when we started talking about the food and beverage tax, we immediately received many challenges from organizations who were not in favor of the tax. We evaluated those challenges and provided advice that the local food and beverage tax was not in fact preempted by the 2019 law on corporate activity. Under that law, the corporate activity tax preempts local laws that are similar to the corporate activity tax. And the corporate activity tax is a tax on businesses that have, for the purpose of this conversation, that have total sales above $1 million. It is a tax directly on the business. The city of Cannon Beach cannot do a local tax that is the same as the CAT. However, so I believe that if we did a food and beverage tax, it would not be subject to the CAT. An additional layer of protection, when you look at the tax, well, we can't do something similar to that. Well, if we have a tax on food and beverage, we are going to be taxing the total sales of some restaurants, most restaurants in town, because that's what you sell. You sell food and you sell beverages. So for an additional layer of protection, we discussed removing beverages, because if we have beverages out of there, we are not taxing the total sales of any restaurant, and we have additional insulation from any liability under the CAT. And we're talking about organizations that have, a litigious history. And so this issue was presented to the council. We discussed the legal risks, and being one of the first local governments who are considering a food and beverage tax after the 2019 CAT came into play, and the one that is receiving the challenges from these litigious organizations, it is my understanding that the council went in the direction of still doing the tax, but doing it just on food and not food and beverages. A point was brought up earlier that I want to address. No matter what we do here, we are preempted under state law from taxing alcoholic beverages. So no matter what, if you are a restaurant that sells alcoholic beverages, those are not subject to the CAT, and you're going to have to back those out anyhow. And to the point about the point of sale systems, it's my understanding that the point of sale systems have the ability to tax some items and not others. So the question of why we are not pursuing a food and beverage tax is an additional layer of insulation. I'm going to get into, the process and what we can and can't do. But, I've been dancing around that in open public meeting because, again, it's a legal liability question that typically is discussed in attorney-client privilege setting. So that is that. I'm sure the council and I have talked about that on many, many times. So I'm sure that you understand and you do not have any additional questions for that. So I think Bruce prepared a good list of questions. I have prepared answers to all of those. I can go through them. If the council wants to discuss the food and beverage item again before I go on, we can do that. So I'll kick it back to you before I go on to my regular scheduled programming.
I think there were two other questions. One, I think they were both brought up by Cindy. Whether or not food going to schools, whether independent contractors supplying schools with food would be taxed.
So I'm sorry, I was distracted during that section. Which section of the code was she referring to?
Don't ask me.
I think it's under exemption. She didn't point out where it was.
Yeah.
Exemptions.
It's under exemptions, and I think it's clear. She thought it was not clear.
Okay. Purchased from public or private schools except that food is independent officers. Yeah, so the schools are not paying the tax except for food purchased from the independent contractors at the school should be subject to the tax imposed by the chapter. So I think it's clear. As we go through, one of the things that I want to talk about is when we go through implementation of this tax, if there are things that in practice are difficult, how we go about amending that. So maybe we talk about it then.
Okay, so I'm not clear. The independent contractors would be taxed, but the schools would not. Is that right?
Yes, so exemptions apply to the public or private schools, except that food purchased from independent operating at a school shall be subject to the tax. So if you are a school and you have a food truck roll up and they are selling food there, then they would be subject.
But what about somebody who prepares food off-site but delivers it to the schools for school lunches?
So purchased from, so it would have to be if you were purchasing this, if you were like a student and you're purchasing a school lunch, that would not be taxed. But if you are, yes, if you are the independent contractor selling the food to the school, then the tax would apply, I believe.
So the school would pay the tax.
Yes, I believe so, but I will get back to you on the exact.
Yeah, because I think that could be a problem for schools. I mean, they're trying to get by, for instance, the Cannon Beach Academy. They're trying to get by as swiftly as they can, and that might present a problem. So I'd really like a clarification on that.
Okay. I'm just seeing if a different exemption would apply to them.
I know nonprofits are not subject to the tax.
Okay.
So would schools be considered a nonprofit?
Purchased from nonprofits to citizens over 60 years old. So that's the one that is exempt. So I'll get back to you on that one.
Okay. And then the other question that Cindy had was takeout orders.
So takeout orders are subject to the tax.
Are
So,
subject to the tax?
yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, it seems clear to me. I don't understand the confusion. Well, it says the contractor that's selling
the food to the school.
The contractor will pay the tax. The school doesn't.
Well, the school they pass the cost on to the school.
Yeah, that's the point.
That's the point.
The purchaser pays the tax, not the deliverer. So if a contractor is bringing food to the school pays the tax. And that's what we're probably not wanting.
Yeah.
Right.
Now, if it's, if your example of a food truck comes and a teacher wants a hot dog off of a food truck, that's a different matter.
Yeah, completely different.
But if the purchaser in that case is the school, that should be exempt.
So is that the direction from city council, is to make sure that any school as the consumer is exempt from the tax?
Right. Now, the only caveat on that one is if it's for something other than education of the students. So if the school is having a
fundraising
fair or something for fundraising, that goes into a different category.
Yeah, that'd be like catering.
That'd be kind of like a nonprofit decision, but yeah, that would be more like a catering
Would
situation.
that be the same for the Christian Conference Center? That they're preparing food, or they got food for their students, that they would not be taxed the same as the academy?
Oh, that's a good question.
Well, if the conference center is preparing its own food for the students, that be exempt?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Excuse me, if the conference center is preparing its own food for the students, not dealing with an outside contractor, and that's a totally different question than what we're dealing with now.
I would defer. I would say if they are making their own food for the students, that's exempt. If they are making food for their attendees, because they're essentially a motel, that falls under C, which is exempt because the attendees have paid some sort of fee to be there.
I know sometimes they offer food to people in the community for sale. That would require the tax, yeah.
Okay, so let me make sure I have the city council's desire clarified, because we are kind of getting down to it. So what we would like to exempt is schools purchasing food from independent contractors that the school is then going to serve to its students.
Correct.
Is that the same situation as a Christian Conference Center?
Are they a
They're making-
school?
Well, they're not purchasing the food from someone, but they're preparing it. I'm not sure if we don't need two things, if that's our intent.
Well, the other thing is, so thinking this a little bit more, if the school is just purchasing food from a contractor, they're purchasing grocery items. They're not purchasing prepared foods.
No, they're probably.
That's exactly what.
Yeah.
They're purchasing prepared food?
Yeah.
Sandwiches, things like that.
Okay. Then I'm wrong. So if they're purchasing prepared food, then we want to exempt them. If they're then serving those prepared foods to the students.
Correct.
So when they're the purchaser of like the wholesale prepared foods, if you're purchasing 150 sandwiches that you're then going to feed to students, then you are not wanting to be subject to the tax. Okay.
And I think that does fit for the fact that the conference center purchases groceries and makes their own food. So that's just kind of not even in the picture. But they also purchase food that is made off-site. I don't think Ezra does it anymore, but they used to. So
it just seems a little different. I want to just make sure that we're clear on it, is that I get the way that it's written for the charter school, but if the conference center prepares the food itself, it's not buying it from somebody else. So there's no me buying sandwiches from you and then giving them to kids. It's me making food and giving it to students.
yeah, there's no transaction, actually.
Right. I just want to make sure that,
yeah,
I think that's your intent, but I just want to make sure that it's tight.
Yeah, we'll draft language and send it around.
Yeah, it seems like two different cases.
Okay. Okay, that was a little sidebar there. What was your other?
Oh, the takeout orders, and we got that on.
Well, I think we'll get to the takeout bakery question when we get to your question. So-
Yeah, I think we can address some of this as we go through.
Yeah, why don't you start?
So the first question that Bruce posed is, what exactly is the council voting on the August 3rd meeting, and what does it mean? So I'm going to pull out the resolution, because the resolution is what the council is going to be asked to vote on. And the resolution is the vehicle that sends these questions to the ballot. And under state law, there's a number of things that have to be included in your resolution. So the first three sections of the resolution call for the election. So they authorize in a number of different ways the county to put this matter on the ballot. So an election is hereby called for the city of Cannon Beach to submit to voters a tax on the purchase of prepared food as attached in Exhibit A to this resolution. In effect, what the city council is doing is asking the voters of Cannon Beach to use their legislative authority to enact a code section to the municipal code. So typically the council, through your ordinance process, amends your city code. In this case, we are asking the voters of Cannon Beach to use their legislative power to enact that code section, which is why it's important that we attach the wording that's the proposed wording for the city code to the resolution, and that is Exhibit A. So Section 2, calls the date of the election. Section 3, again, authorizes the county to conduct the legislation within the precinct of Cannon Beach. What Section 4 does is establish what's actually going to go into the voter's pamphlet, and that's what's called the ballot title. We've talked about the ballot title has 3 official sections: a caption, which can only be 10 words, and it discusses the subject of the referral; a question that has to be answered in the affirmative, if you want the measure to pass. So what are we asking the voters to approve? We're asking the voters to approve a tax. A summary describing the major effects of the measure. And I should say the question is 20 words. The summary is 175 words. And then the explanatory statement provides more detail on the measure. As we talked about before, this is not an advocacy piece. The main goals of the ballot title are to be clear and concise and impartial. There were some suggestions today regarding changes. One by Bruce, which is adding the word infrastructure, and then a couple others by members of the audience. All of those changes are totally fine by me. They don't change. The only one changed by Bruce changes the word count, but we have 5 words to spare in the summary. So I would be fine with making all of the suggestions made tonight, if that is the will of the council.
One of the suggestions is changing the order of
Mhm.
the funds to be used. Okay.
Yeah, that.
No, I agree to that too.
So just moving along, section 6 authorizes city staff to take all necessary steps to carry out the objective of getting this on the ballot. One of the things that we're going to talk next about is what are the next steps. So instead of authorizing, Jen, who is going to be doing a lot of this on each individual matter, to just do a blanket authorization to city staff to get this done. That's it for the resolution. Once you guys pass, if the resolution passes at our next meeting, what happens next is the process starts to get it certified to the county. And once you guys refer the measure to the ballot, the city elections official, who is your city recorder, officially receives, or the measure is, or the resolution is filed with her the next day. After she officially receives the resolution, we are going to publish notice of the resolution. You have to publish in the next edition of your local newspaper. You have to post it on your website for at least 7 days. And you have to give voters instructions on how they can challenge the text of the measure. So for instance, if somebody believes that instead of being impartial, this is an advocacy piece, it's not factual, then they can challenge. And that will immediately go to the Clatsop Circuit Court to hear a challenge specifically on the wording of the ballot. If the judge agrees that the ballot title isn't impartial, the judge essentially rewrites it for us, and then that goes to the county. It goes to the county election officials to be put in the voters pamphlet. So that is a 7-day challenge period. After the challenge period ends, which happens 99.9% of the time, there's no challenge to the text of the ballot title. Jen will then fill out a form, an SEL 801 or 802 notice of measure election, and sends it over to the county and that essentially certifies that we did the challenge process. And then the county takes it from there. The city has until 61 days before the date of the election. So 61 days before the November 2nd election. If you choose to withdraw your food and beverage tax, you can do so during that time. If you remember, City of Madras withdrew their tax, they did it within that period. So that's what happens next and what the resolution does. Any questions on that?
What did you say the time period was for withdrawing?
Until 61 days before November 2nd.
Which isn't very far.
No.
Now.
And that's just because they're printing the ballots they're printing the voter pamphlets and getting them distributed. And once it's done, it's balloon the coop, so to speak. Okay, so the next question, and these will move faster because they're overlapping some of them. So the next question, if approved by voters, can it subsequently be changed and how? So if it is approved by voters, the voters have used their legislative authority to enact a chapter to your city code. Once it becomes part of your city code, it's like any other part of your city code. So, through implementation, if there's a hiccup in how the tax is administered, if there's some confusion about some of the language in the tax, the city council, using your legislative authority, you pass an ordinance, you can amend a portion of the tax. You had no obligation to refer this tax to voters. You did choose to do so. You can choose to do so again. So for instance, let's say that there's a larger portion of the tax, larger section of the tax. It's not ministerial. It will have a big effect on voters, or a big effect on the public. If you want to refer it back to the voters to make a change, you can certainly do that. You don't necessarily have to. Any questions on that before I move on? So what occurs between council action on the resolution and referral to November? So as we talked about before, the biggest thing that happens once the resolution is certified to the ballot or the ballot title is certified to the county, I should say, is that there's a prohibition on public employee campaigning. That actually doesn't happen until after that 7-day period and Jen sends the form in. Again, out of abundance of caution, what I advise my clients is that you consider that prohibition started when you refer the measure, when the city council passes that, because that's a finite time that everybody's aware of. And you're not having to alert everybody, when Jen finally turns in that form, if there was a challenge, if there wasn't. So it is admittedly abundance of caution that we are doing it. We are starting that prohibition a little bit early to reduce any confusion. So nothing changes for the members of the city council. You guys can continue campaigning on this issue. For public employees, it is more difficult. Public employees don't lose their First Amendment rights just because they're public employees. What the prohibition is that they are not allowed to campaign on city time and on city dime. So that is easier for somebody that is a non-exempt worker who works a 9-to-5 position. That person's not at work. They're not on city time. They're not doing the city's business. It's very clear that they can express opinions and campaign for or against the tax. For exempt employees, it is a little bit more difficult. I'm sure Bruce would tell you that he's never not on city time. Those employees can still have opinions about this. They just need to be very, very clear that they are not making comments pursuant to their official position, using any sort of city resources, etc. The prohibition applies to both public employees and appointed officials. So, again, if somebody's on the planning commission, they cannot be campaigning while they are doing their planning commission duties. So while they're at the planning commission meetings or while they're representing the city somewhere else. But in their free time, they are free to have opinions about this.
But city councilors can do that.
City councilors can, yes, you just cannot engage public employees or use public resources. The city still can.
Sorry, if I may interrupt you just for a moment, and because it was brought up, that includes using a copier, things like that.
Yep.
So that we're clear about that.
Yes.
And that would be city property as well. So if nobody could, so the city park, for instance, could not be used as a place for people to have a rally or promotion or committee meeting or whatever.
So if it's open to the public and both sides have equal access, that's fine.
Okay.
What isn't okay is, as the mayor, you have access to the city copy machine and you are campaigning for this measure and you want to use the city copy machine, whereas, somebody who's opposed to this measure doesn't have that same equal access. But if you are getting a permit to have, an event in a park that you are just acting like any other citizen, that's fine.
Okay.
Let me also ask about just the general information. So if I were to come in and ask Bruce, how many people are we going to actually live here in town? The question that was asked me. If he tells me 1,700, he could, the opposition could come in and ask of him the same question, could they not?
Yeah, and Bruce can give any public employee, whether or not on city time, can provide factual information.
That's what I wanted to clarify.
That is an innocuous question. What is the population of City Cannon Beach? Where we need to be more careful is that when we're providing factual information, we aren't advocating. And so that doesn't mean that we can't have public information events. A lot of city governments that have these things on the ballot will still have a town hall. And that town hall will provide equal time to both sides of an issue if they want it. And they can do a presentation that is factual. You don't actually have to send that information to the Secretary of State for their, review about whether or not it's factual and neutral, but it provides a safe harbor. So if you do that and they tell you to take almost everything out, you can't later get in trouble for doing so.
But somebody could come in and ask Bruce, for instance, a copy of the Econ Northwest study, and he could hand it to them. But he
Yeah.
just wouldn't be able to say, oh, yeah, read this because this is really going to improve our.
Best study ever, right?
Yeah.
I just want, one thing, what my plan is in working with staff is if somebody asks for something, is it just do a public records request? And that way we're giving materials that have already been produced and we can go ahead and provide it. And we have documentation of what was requested and that sort of thing. Trying to avoid, me giving, Nancy something, but I didn't offer the same material to Mike. If you make the request, we will give that to you based on your request. Okay. Let's ask one other question of Ashley. Is it possible for staff to put together a PowerPoint that has a lot of discussion that we've had in the past and then just turn it over and you all can say, we like this, we don't like this. Or if you're doing individual presentations, you can cut and paste it. But it would be something that you would already have before the
prohibition.
Before the prohibition. And can we assist? Like if somebody's saying, well, how do I take this slide out? Or do we just say, sorry, can't help you?
So I would say that we can gather all the information that we've already prepared and provide it to council for their use, post prohibition. I think after that, unless it's a factual neutral, city staff members or people that are subject to the prohibition shouldn't have a role in that.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. And so that it's clear, the material I'm talking about are discussions we've already had, slides you've already seen, that sort of thing, not to go ahead and generate advocacy.
Yeah, we can sort of hand over the file.
Yeah.
Okay, so keeping moving here. So what happens assuming the referral passes or fails? So if it passes, the language is enacted. What the language of the resolution says in Exhibit A is that the tax is effective on July 1st, 2022. So between November and July 1st, 2022, that's when the city would start doing the education, would start working on the administrative procedures, start working on the grant program. That's what would happen immediately. If the measure fails, the code language is not enacted. That does not mean that the council couldn't in the future use your legislative authority to enact a food and beverage tax or refer it to voters again in the future.
I learned something from Ashley today. If you would explain how it's the voters are enacting the ordinance, so there's no reason for the council to have to take an action after.
I think we chatted about that. Yes, this is the voters that are enacting this language. So they're using their legislative authority. You guys have a different process for using your legislative authority, which is in your staff or in your charter, adopting ordinances.
So you won't have to adopt an ordinance because it's adopted at their behest.
But again, if there are things that we need to tweak later on in the process, we're not prohibited from doing that. And so that's why some of the issues with, some of the language, yes, we should get those taken care of before this goes to voters. But, if something needs to be addressed later on, we can certainly do that. So what is the relationship with the fire district during this time? No changes. What is the relationship with the fire district, assuming the referral passes? One of the big things is we need to get that intergovernmental agreement in place. And so we would work on doing that.
I have a question. Mark is subject to the same situation where he cannot advocate, isn't that right?
Yeah, I would assume so.
That's
our stance on it.
Okay.
And then what is the city, what is the relationship, the IGA? What is the city council's, city personnel relationship with groups supporting or opposing measure? City council, you guys are elected officials. You can be part of any formal or informal advocacy group at any time. So with the city, if it's a advocacy group, again, we would treat them like anybody, any other member of the public. We can provide factual information. We can provide any assistance that is open to anybody else. So the last question is not really for me. What sort of grant structure formula is being considered to assist the businesses? I'm going to turn that one over to Bruce unless there are any additional process questions for me.
Good. Thank you very much. Ashton.
Thanks, Ashley. The reason for that is that I think that, first of all, I think it was a great idea to go ahead and offer this and finding a way to do it as a grant. But I think people are going to have an expectation of what is it going to, I'm sorry. I think we ought to set the boundaries for what they can likely expect. Because somebody might think that, if I buy a $20,000 system, they've got to pay me back and Mike can go ahead and fix this for $100. So, and then you've also got the equity problem that if Sam has a restaurant and it's larger and sophisticated, and he already has a system, and Bruce is just starting out and has nothing, because Sam already has it, do we owe Sam anything? So that's part of the equity as you go through, because if I've already made the investment, should I not get it? But if I hadn't made the investment, you all would, pay for something for me. So I think that probably between the time we put get the ballot out there and November 2nd, we should make sure that we've had that discussion to kind of, set expectations. And also Mark and I are working on a draft agreement. And as far as trying to identify the issues, that sort of thing. And then we will be involving, our respective attorneys to do that. So we're not working on the legalese, we're working on more the operational aspects. When the money is turned over, that kind of thing.
Have you contemplated that the grant be repaid out of their allowed 5% administrative fee over time?
No, we haven't thought anything. I'm sorry, I was still at the fire department. No, we've not, kicked that around at all.
A thought that also came to my mind was to use those funds to hire a consultant that is a point of sale, knows the process, and could then assess what a restaurant has, so that we're not they're not asking for a grant for a whole new system when all they need to do is get an upgrade.
Yeah, and actually, Daryl Kamasu has offered to do that from our budget committee, has offered to do that at no cost to the city or the restaurants. And he said he would actually represent the restaurants with the vendors. So he's been very generous in that. And I talked to him and I said, you want to do that? And he goes, yeah, I still do. So I think that that's another resource that we have. We can hire somebody, but he's offered to do it at no cost.
All right, okay.
I think that's an excellent suggestion, Sam.
I think that definitely should figure into the process. Mike's idea of how it could be paid for from either the 5% or from the total somehow also needs.
Yeah, we just need to firm that up. And maybe that offer to provide a consultant has a fixed window.
Yeah.
It's not forever.
No,
Definitely.
My thinking is that anybody that comes on board after the tax has been enacted, they know about it.
Yeah.
Also, something to keep in mind, I think that a lot of people, if we're talking about saying you can go ahead and hold off on paying your 5% until your system's paid for, there are some people that sounded to me like they were concerned about the initial cost. And we won't have, let me see, the 5% won't help them in that situation, other than to possibly repay a loan or something. So if council would want to do something where we were fronting money, we could probably find a way to do that. So they didn't have to, they can still pay it back out of the 5%, but we can try to get money to people before the July 1st date.
Be a grant up front, but they pay it back out of their 5%.
Yeah,
I don't know, a grant is a grant.
a grant's a grant, right?
I don't know why we would ask them to pay it back in their 5%. That 5% is going to be something for them, but it's not going to be the whole thing. I mean,
Right.
I think at least my intent in my first motion was to help them along, not necessarily require them to pay it back.
I feel like that. I was thinking more of the 5% that the city is retaining for function stuff. But
because we are going to have significant costs first year.
yeah. Okay.
I went back and did as accurate as Bruce can be, but I think it's going to be around August 31st is our 61.
That's right. That's what I just worked out too.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what that meant.
That's when the 61 days kicks in, is
You can bail.
August 31st.
You can bail up to August 31st
Oh. Okay.
in terms of accounting.
And if we, use your term bailed or somehow didn't even make the deadline, we could still, as a council, enact the ordinance with the second reading and so forth. Okay.
Yeah, you could. This is just, I think it assumes that we did meet the deadline. And then they'll hold back on printing ballots and things like that until some date after August 31st. But you can say, never mind, up until August 31st.
Okay.
Not a problem.
Timing on getting a different issue. Timing on getting the MOU with the fire department.
Realistically, I think it's going to be a month. And the reason for that is that there's a lot of issues that, we had not thought about until we started going back and forth. And so I think there's a lot of things that are operational that Mark and I have to sort out. And then it depends on how you want to do the process. We can either I can bring it to you, Mark can bring it to his board. But I think I would rather bring it to our attorney, they bring it to their attorney, and then get it as close as we can. And then, go to the respective boards. But that's when I think it'll get interesting.
Yeah. My first thought was, would it be helpful or not to do a joint council board meeting?
I think at some point, definitely.
After you've talked to the lawyers and all that.
Yeah, that probably would.
Okay.
However you want to finalize it. But I think probably would be good if like Ashley and I present to you, Mark and his attorney present to the board, and then we have that joint meeting or whatever other direction you might provide.
And so then the idea would be to get this pretty well firm by September. Because that will help present, I think, the facts that people are still kind of questioning. Okay, cool.
One thing that came up that I had heard about, and I'm going to ask Mark, are you planning on using some of the money that you would be getting from this tax to purchase houses in town?
If I can afford to, I would love to.
Okay, because it doesn't really say that here.
Right.
And where would it kind of be specific enough about that?
I think it's very hard for us to be specific that way. When we're really trying, the kind of things I listed out of top priority is fire marshal and medic. Those are the two number one things in the first year to get accomplished. Is you get a medic unit in. I've met with Medic's ambulance 4 times now. We're already working on contract trying to get them into town. It's essential. It's going to cost money because they're not going to just put an ambulance here. They have to make money too. But those two are number one things. I'm already working on a house right now of the district, they're renting it right now. We're trying to continue that rent to put some volunteers in, because I'm losing volunteers right now. They can't afford to live here, and their houses are being sold. I got guys living in station, I got guys living in attics, trying to stay living this here, and want to stay living here. And so that is a huge priority. We were trying to do that with the last levy, and we haven't been able to afford to. As you well know, the costs of them have gone up so dramatically. We weren't able to. And so that is a huge priority of the district, is to get housing. So it comes down to, can we afford to? But that's a way to retain volunteers.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. I just noticed in there, in the analysis, CBRFD, CBRFPD, right? The acronym.
That was me. I mean, I for some reason I didn't pick up protection, so I've been using the CBRFD every place I've done a document, so.
Protection district.
Yeah. Thank you, Sharon, for correcting me on that, because nobody has corrected me yet, so.
Is that going to cause us some word count issues?
No, so it is not in anywhere that requires. So yes, we have to add it. We have 5 words to spare in the summary. We can add it there. And we have some words to spare in the explanatory statement, so.
Just checking, because would an acronym work in that document?
Yes.
If you had to, I guess.
That's the first time you identify it.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't think it would, because this is like thinking about what would be on the ballot. I think we need it.
Okay, thank you.
I found 3 words for you to delete in the explanatory statement.
We have some room there, but if you feel like it's better, we can.
It says, in 2020, 77% of the 465 incidents in the district responded to were for visitors to the area. You can just take out to the area.
Okay.
So there's 3 words for you.
So Nancy has a credit balance.
Yeah, there you go.
Now she wants to add something.
She wants to add words to another ordinance. She's got it.
I have one correction. Haystack Rock Appreciation Program, it's awareness program.
Okay.
Can I ask another question? Okay, this is on the first page of attachment A. And it says, whereas the city conducted a study by Econ Northwest demonstrating that a 5% tax on the purchase of prepared food would generate approximately $1,726,360 per year in tax revenue. When they did that, weren't they looking at a food and beverage tax? It wasn't just the prepared food at that time.
It's correct. It was a food and beverage.
Okay, so I think it should say that, because what we're asking is for a prepared food tax. And that isn't what they were looking at when they gave us these numbers.
So that is true, but again, that tax did not include the main beverage driver's alcohol. And so that study did not include alcohol.
I would like to see what the actual number is, because I don't think that one is correct.
I don't think we have an actual number because they didn't do that study.
Well,
And we shouldn't have it in here.
Well, it may be possible we can contact Bob, who did the study, to see if there's a factor where we can pull out beverage, if you would prefer to do that. So
when we contacted Ashland, we asked Ashland this question. And Ashland gave us 15% was what they generated, what they felt they generated for beverage.
Yeah, I think that asking Northwest, since we're relying on their information, is it possible to back out Beverage? Yeah, I think that would be good. And also, if I wasn't looking at it, but if I understood what Robin read, it was actually a joint study. You said that it was the city conducted?
That's what it says here in the resolution.
Yeah, I think that the district with a P in it and the city jointly conducted the study.
Okay, yeah, add that.
It was initiated by Mark.
Okay.
So what, I actually wanted to note something. We do have some words to spare in the explanatory statement. And one of the things that I noted as we were talking here is that we could include information about the study in the explanatory statement. For instance, this study shows that 96% of the tax will be paid for by visitors. And if we are able to get the number that backs out the beverages, we can add that as well.
But I don't think this number is accurate.
Okay.
Well, I think that the emphasis here is that this is a study.
Right.
So no study is going to have accurate numbers of what we are expecting to get. This study is showing what that consultant has demonstrated. The demonstrator seems a good word. That is an approximate.
Then we can use food and beverage to explain that that's
Yeah,
what he
you could-
was looking at.
Yeah, basically,
Yeah.
you're saying this is what that study shows. Look at the study.
Right,
That's what you
okay,
should
that's
say.
fine. I just think it should be clear what he was looking at.
I'd be shocked if Bob can't give us that number. I mean, he knew everything. So we could probably ask, and then you can add that as a choice.
Okay,
I would, my preference almost would be to remove the number and say that Eco Northwest demonstrated that a 5% prepared tax showed a substantial annual income or something more generic, because as soon as you give a specific number, people attach to numbers. Because like, if in the first year we only give 400,000, oops, our bad, but it needs to be, go to the study to glean off your own information from the study.
Mhm.
And the study is available on the city website.
so just change it to food and beverage. Because that's what his study was.
Well, yeah, that,
Okay,
I don't know. I'm not that stuck on this. I'm just,
I am, it's the truth.
yeah, but it's a study. And studies are generic in their presentation anyhow, so.
I think I would rather go and say it, use the word food, prepared food tax and get a more clear number for just food. Because if you say food and beverage tax, we're going to say, well, but I thought it's
but
beverage and it's not what- so I would rather just be more clear. And I like the idea of not saying that we're going to get 1.7 million. I like the idea of saying it's substantial amount or whatever we do that, because you're right. They'll say, well, you didn't get your 1.7 million, so why did we even approve this? So
I'm sorry, what's the direction? Is it to substantial or to get the updated number?
I think we're going to try to get the updated number, and we can have this discussion on the 3rd, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
As soon as we hear something, we'll get it to council.
Maybe you could put that little plus and minus sign behind the numbers.
Well, let's say approximately.
I know, yeah,
yeah.
I know. That's what I was seeing the first. Okay, cool.
And I have one question. With anything, that, be it the Northwest study or anything like that we currently have on the website, do we just leave that alone?
Yeah, we'll take a look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's take a look at it. I think almost everything we have is factual.
Right, but if we get into, other projects or something,
Right.
I just want to make sure that, I don't think we've ever, well, what if staff advocated, for example, that council move forward on the water supply resiliency. So we advocated for that, but we advocated for months ago.
That's not the subject of the measure that's being referred.
Okay.
So we're fine.
All right.
So I'm glad that we had this meeting tonight. What I will prepare for next week is a clean copy and a track change copy based on the things that we talked about tonight. And I would ask that, especially with the new exemption, I would ask that council review that and make sure the language that I draft captures what you'd like. And if it's not, to email me directly or to let me know directly. Just to make next week go as smoothly as possible.
I'm asking the council, does anybody have any question about the nonprofit, and that'd be line G under exemptions? That's just for the older folks. Where'd it go? F.
I'm sorry, Sam, are you under
Yeah,
exemptions?
what page is it?
Exemptions, it's page 2.
Uh-oh.
3.3.030.
Yeah.
I don't see the nonprofit. I just see the overnight and residential facility.
But G is the only one that says nonprofit. Purchase from nonprofit tax exempt organizations to citizens over 60 years of age as part of a recognized senior citizen nutrition program. That's just a holdover from Ashland, I think.
Ashland Yachats and
We don't have that type of facility at the moment. Could happen. But I thought we had a discussion at some point about how nonprofits fit into the exemptions.
I'm thinking of the American Legion. I mean, that's a nonprofit, right?
I don't know.
I mean, would taxed at the American Legion, at burgers night or Sunday pancakes or oyster dinners?
Oh, here it is.
I hope not the oyster dinners.
I'm sorry, here's what I was looking for. E. Purchased from temporary restaurants, including food stands, booths, street concessions, and similar type operations operated by nonprofit organizations or service clubs. So.
Wouldn't that include the Legion?
That would probably include the American.
Nonprofit, that would include.
Yeah.
Service club.
Yeah.
I thought we'd covered that before.
Okay, I couldn't find it, and that's all I was asking.
Okay.
Okay. I'm good. Okay, you got your marchers in order. Everything you need to add?
That's the homework report
Yeah.
Okay.
for this time.
Yeah, I went through this and last meeting I had mentioned that I had some changes. I realized I was just playing with words. I was not changing any substance. I didn't throw a bunch of stuff at you. So.
Thank everybody for taking the time to come tonight. I think it's good.
Okay, we will close that and go to our good of the order for the council.
Is Rick still here?
Rick?
He left a little while ago.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering about the mask mandates a little bit and how it might. Jane?
Yeah, I'll ask him and then we can send you something out. My guess is it's going to be one of those things that's real amorphous for a while until something finally gets decided. But we'll see what we can provide.
Weren't there like 13 people that were in Sun River that came back and had COVID?
I got an email from the state, not really official, But what they were saying is that they're trying to follow what CDC is going through right now. CDC is only recommending. They have not made any sort of hard line. So I don't think the county is going to make a hard line until the state does.
Well, the governor has come out with a recommendation.
Yeah, but it's, again, it's a recommendation.
Yeah.
It's not any sort of requirements.
All right.
So it might be a good idea. I've noticed just at the gallery last weekend that more than half my customers were all wearing their masks.
I was shocked and surprised when I went into Safeway. I'd say probably 25-30% of the people were wearing masks.
Wow, that's a change from last.
Yes, no, it was like, what do those guys got on, you know? Because I'm so used to seeing them without them, everybody.
We saw that in Portland the other day too.
My only concern was we haven't gotten rid of all the critter signs yet, have we?
They are all in my office stacked up.
Just saw those.
Just in case, we might need to.
No. And, you know, and unfortunately, if we ever need it, the black one that says, you know, we're closed, bye-bye. I still have those. Hope you never see them, you have to use them again.
Well, those critters in your office are going to have to fumigate it.
I know that, and I'll also be bringing those to you for decisions on disposition.
I think we should keep them for a while.
But we'll keep them for a while. I like that idea.
All over in here for now.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else for good of the order? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks.
Now,
Thank
Jean,
you.